Hey, soldier! Welcome to Pocket Ronnie. Sit down, pay attention, and conquer your fear of math.
We're doing parallel and perpendicular lines. One thing as a reminder, again, this is a review from Algebra, but in case you don't remember, parallel lines have the same slope. That would make sense because these lines are parallel. Well, if I drew them perfectly, they have the same slope. So parallel lines have the same slope. Perpendicular lines have opposite reciprocal slopes. These are the words I like to use personally, opposite reciprocal. Opposite means the opposite sign. They have opposite signs and then there are reciprocals. For example, if you had a slope of 2/5, then if you want to be perpendicular to that, your slope would be the opposite sign. This is positive, so I need a negative, and then take the reciprocal of 2/5. The reciprocal is 5/2. Reciprocal just means you're flipping the fraction. Here's another example. What if you had a slope of -3? Remember, you can turn any whole number into a fraction by putting it over 1. If I want to be perpendicular to that, then my slope has to be the opposite sign. This is a negative, so I need a positive, and then the reciprocal of 3/1 is 1/3, positive 1/3. So these two slopes will be perpendicular. These two slopes will be perpendicular to each other. All right, let's look at 21A, 3 through 5. They're asking for the slope and the intercept that's parallel to y equals 3x plus 2 through the point 0, 0, the origin. Then they're asking for you to describe the new line, the new parallel line in slope-intercept form, and then graph both lines. Anytime I see the word parallel, I always underline it in my problem because that helps me to remember parallel lines have what kind of slopes? They have the same slopes. Well, so I go to my equation here. What is the slope in this equation? It's already in slope-intercept form. You have to make sure it's in slope-intercept form because that is the only way you know the equation of the line. Remember, the slope is the number, the coefficient before your x. So my slope is 3. So if I want to be parallel to this line, then I need to also have a slope of 3. And I usually write that down just to keep up with all my accounting and keep up with my notes. That's actually one of your answers. So the slope of your new line will be 3. We are going to be going through the point 0, 0. Remember, when they give you a coordinate, that is an x and a y value. So we can take our x and y value and plug it back into y equals mx plus b, general equation of a line, to find our y-intercept. Because remember, we know a y coordinate, we know an x coordinate, and we know our slope. So the only thing that we don't know is our y-intercept, and so this is how we calculate our y-intercept. So my y coordinate from my point that they gave me is 0, my slope is 3, and my x coordinate is 0. 0 times anything is 0, so that goes away. So turns out that my y-intercept is 0. This line will cross through the origin. That was one of our answers too. Then the next thing it asks is describe the new line in slope-intercept form. Remember, we can take these values now and put them back into y equals mx plus b to get an equation of our line. So our line will be y equals, our slope is 3x. It's going through the origin, the y-intercept is 0. So this doesn't have to be written. It's not wrong if you write plus 0, but this would be the equation of your new line. Okay, we're at 21A5. The problem asked us to graph both lines. The original equation that they gave us in the problem is we want to be parallel to y equals 3x plus 2. After we found our slope and our y-intercept, our new equation was going to be y equals 3x. So let's first graph y equals 3x plus 2. Remember, you always graph the y-intercept first. Starting from the origin, my y-intercept is a positive 2, so you go up 1, 2. Then my slope is 3. You can make any number of fraction by putting it over 1. So I can make my slope 3 over 1, rise over run. So from my y-intercept, I can count up 3, 1, 2, 3, over to the right, 1. That is my original line. Okay, now my new line that I calculated, that was going to be parallel to that. So remember, if they're parallel, you should look in your graph to make sure that they're parallel. What is my y-intercept? 0. So I'm crossing the y-axis at the origin. Again, I still should have the same slope, 3 over 1. So from the origin, from the y-intercept, I can count up 3, 1, 2, 3, and then go over to the right 1. And then that is my new line. I'm not using a straight edge, so when you guys use a straight edge, your lines will be nicer than mine, but I do see that these are parallel. Okay, we're doing 21E, 1 through 4. The problem asks us to find the slope and intercept that is parallel to 2y equals x through the point -2, -3. They are asking you to put the new line, the new parallel line, in the slope-intercept form and standard form, and then to graph the new line. Okay, key word is we want to be parallel to this line. So you have this line of 2y equals x. When it is in this form, we cannot tell what the slope is. So it is important to put your equation in slope-intercept form to be able to determine the slope. Because since they're parallel, we know that parallel lines have the same slope. So to put this in slope-intercept form, we want y on one side and everything else on the other side, which means we have to get rid of the 2. Divide everything by 2. When there's no coefficient in front, that's like a 1. So those go away. So then we have the equation of, we can write this as 1/2 x. And remember, there's no y-intercept. It's crossing the y-axis at the origin. And we don't have to write that. Okay, so we want to be parallel to this equation. Parallel lines have the same slope, so I know that my new line needs to be a slope of 1/2 as well. That's one of our questions that they're asking us. Now we need to find the y-intercept. So they gave us a point in the problem, and when they give you a point, that is a x, y coordinate. So we can take the information that we have and plug it back into the general equation of a line of y equals mx plus b. We are given a y coordinate, we know our slope, we are given an x coordinate. The only thing that we don't know is the y-intercept. So my y coordinate was -3. Keep up with negative signs. My slope is 1/2 times my x coordinate is -2 plus b. I can turn any number into a fraction by putting it over 1. My 2's cancel, but my negative sign is still there, so don't lose that negative. So the 2's cancel, but then I would have like a 1 times a -1, which is a -1. Plus b, solving for b, add 1 to the other side, so b is -2. So then it said, write your new line in slope-intercept form. We know the slope, we know the y-intercept, so we can write it in slope-intercept form of 1/2 x minus 2, because my y-intercept is -2. That is one of your answers. Then it says to also put it in standard form. So if we start off with slope-intercept form, put it into standard form. Standard form is x's and y's on one side, whole numbers on the other. Standard form, you cannot have fractions. So I have to multiply this by 2 to get rid of that fraction. If I multiply this by 2, I have to multiply everything by a 2. So then those 2's cancel, and I have 2y equals 1x minus 4. Moving my x over. Can't add x's and y's together, so I can write -1x plus 2y equals -4. If you don't like the negative in front, then you can multiply everything by -1 and then just change the sign of everything. So it would then become x minus 2y equals 4. So either one of those equations is acceptable. Okay, we're 21E4. The problem asked us to graph the new line, but I am going to graph both of the lines. So our original equation in slope-intercept form was y equals 1/2 x. My new line that was parallel to that was y equals 1/2 x minus 2. So I'm going to graph the original line first. Remember, when there's no number out here, that's +0. We're crossing the y-intercept at the origin. So you graph your y-intercept first. There's a point there. So then I can count my slope. My slope is 1/2. So from my y-intercept, go up 1, over to the right 1, 2. This is my original line. It would probably be a good idea if you guys labeled the lines. So if I could label this, I could label it right on my line as y equals 1/2 x. Okay, now let's graph our new line. Remember, they should be parallel. So my y-intercept is a -2. So from the origin, I need to go down 1, 2, since it's a -2. Now I can count my slope, +1 over +2. So from my y-intercept, I can go up 1 and over to the right 2. And these lines should be parallel because the problem told us that they were parallel. And I can label this one as y equals 1/2 x minus 2. We're looking at 21b, 6 through 8. They're asking us to find the slope and the intercept of a line perpendicular to y equals -3x through the point -1, 3. They're asking you to put the new line in slope-intercept form and then to graph both lines. The key here is that we want to be perpendicular, okay? Perpendicular lines have opposite reciprocal slopes. So if I want to be perpendicular to this line, first off, this is already in slope-intercept form, so my slope is -3. I can turn any number into a fraction by putting it over 1. I need to be perpendicular to this slope. Perpendicular slopes our opposite reciprocals, so I need the opposite sign of this, which is a positive. I don't need to write the positive, but I'm just writing it just to remind you. And then the reciprocal of 3 over 1, 1 over 3. So my perpendicular line will have a slope of 1/3. Okay, so that's one of your answers. Now we've got to find the y-intercept. They've given you a point. Remember, that point is an x and y value. So we can take our slope and our point and plug them into y equals mx plus b. I know a y coordinate, I know my slope, I know my x coordinate, I don't know my y-intercept. So plugging that in, my y coordinate is 3. My slope is 1/3 times my x coordinate is -1 plus b. I can turn any number into a fraction by putting it over 1. So then I have 3 equals 1 times -1, -1 over 3 times 1, 3, plus b. I can solve this either working with fractions or getting rid of the fractions. I usually like to get rid of fractions, so to get rid of this fraction, I need to multiply by 3. If I multiply this by 3, I have to multiply everything by 3. Don't forget to multiply your b by 3 as well. So here, my 3's cancel, so I'm left with 9 equals -1, don't lose your negative sign, plus 3b. Solving for b, add 1 to both sides, so it would be 10 equals 3b, divide both sides by 3, so b equals 10/3. So that's one of my answers. Then it says, put your the new line in slope-intercept form. Well, I know my slope and I know my y-intercept, so now I can say y equals 1/3 x plus 10/3. That is my slope-intercept form. Okay, we're at 21b8. The problem asked us to graph both lines, meaning we need to graph the original line and then the new perpendicular line. So when you graph these lines, they should be perpendicular to each other. Remember, perpendicular lines form a square corner. Like my x and y axis line, they are perpendicular. So our original equation is y equals -3x, meaning I'm crossing the y-axis at the origin because there's nothing out here, so I can do a point at the origin. Then my slope is -3. I can put that over 1. So from my y-intercept, I need to go down, since it's -3, go down 3. 1, 2, 3. Then go over to the right, 1. So that is my original line. So this is the y equals -3x line. Then my new perpendicular line is y equals 1/3 x plus 10/3. When you have improper fractions, it's okay to leave your improper fraction in the equation, but when you graph it, you need to change it to a mixed number for graphing purposes, unless you know where 10/3 is on the graph. So I'll only change this to a mixed number for graphing purposes. So 10/3 is the same as 3 1/3. Okay, so on my graph, it's a positive. So from my origin, I'm going to go up 3, 1, 2, 3, and then 1/3 of the space. This is why graphing is an estimate. So now from that y-intercept, I need to count my slope. My slope is 1/3. That means go up 1 and then over to the right 3. So from my space, I'm in between two lines. You need to go up one whole space, which means I will be 1/3 of the distance in between the next two lines, and then go over 1, 2, 3. So remember, you're not going to be right on crosshairs there because you should be 1/3 of the space up. And then that is my new line. These two lines should be perpendicular, and yes, that looks perpendicular. So this is the line. It's good to label these. Y equals 1/3 x plus 10/3. Okay, 21D, 1 through 4. It's asking us to find the slope and the intercept of a line perpendicular to 2y equals negative 6x plus 10 through the point negative 1, 0. It's asking us to put the new line in slope-intercept form, standard form, and then to graph the new line. Remember, the problem asked us for perpendicular. We want to be perpendicular to the line that they give us. I usually underline the word perpendicular to remind me I need the opposite reciprocal slope. The equation that they give us is not in slope-intercept form. It needs to be in slope-intercept form in order to see the slope, to be able to do the perpendicular, to get the perpendicular slope. So to put it in slope-intercept form, y is already over here and everything else is over there, but I need to get rid of the 2. So if I divide this by 2, I have to divide everything by 2. So now y equals a negative divided by a positive is a negative plus 5. So that's the equation of my original line. I want to be perpendicular to negative 3. So I can turn this into a fraction by putting it over 1. If I want to be perpendicular to that, I have to have the opposite sign, which would be a positive, and then the reciprocal of 3 over 1 is 1 over 3. So that would be my slope of my perpendicular line. Now I can find my y-intercept. Remember, they gave me a point, which is an x and y coordinate. So I can take all that, plug it back into y equals mx plus b to solve for my y-intercept. My y value is 0. My slope is 1/3. My x value is negative 1 plus b. I can turn that into a fraction. So I have 0 equals negative 1/3 plus b. Here you can either get rid of fractions or you can work with the fractions. Since I have 0 over here, if I add 1/3 to both sides, I can see that 0 plus 1/3 is still just 1/3. You could still go through the process of getting rid of the fractions, you would get the same answer. So since 0 is an easy number to work with, so I just kept the fractions. So my y-intercept is 1/3. So now I can write the equation of my new line, my new perpendicular line, in slope-intercept form. Y equals 1/3 x plus 1/3, because my slope was 1/3, my y-intercept was 1/3. Then they ask us to put that in standard form. Standard form means x's and y's on one side and whole numbers on the other side with no fractions. Standard form does not have fractions, so they both have a denominator of 3. So if I multiply these both by 3 to get rid of the denominator, I have to multiply everything by 3. So then I have 3y, those 3's cancel, 1x plus 1, moving my x to the other side. Can't combine x's and y's, so then we leave it just like that. You can also change the sign if you don't want the negative in front of the x. Okay, we're graphing 21D4. The problem asks us to graph only the new line, but I am going to graph the original line because these lines are perpendicular. In my opinion, it's good to graph both the original and the new one just to make sure that your lines are truly perpendicular. So our original line, once we put it in slope-intercept form, is y equals negative 3x plus 5. You can only graph when it's in slope-intercept form because then I can see the y-intercept and the slope. So my y-intercept is a positive 5. So from the origin, count up 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's one of my points. To get my second point, I count the slope. I have a slope of negative 3, and I can put it over 1. So from my y-intercept, I need to go down 3. 1, 2, 3. Over to the right, positive 1. Okay, so that is my original line. So going to label that y equals negative 3x plus 5. Now to graph my line that should be perpendicular. I have a y-intercept of positive 1/3. So from the origin, I'm just going to go up 1/3 of the way. Again, that's just an estimate. Now I can count my slope. Positive 1 over positive 3. So from my y-intercept, go up a positive 1, and then over to the right, positive 3. 1, 2, 3. And these lines should be perpendicular to each other, and they are. And this is the line y equals 1/3 x plus 1/3.